It's a lovely day outside, and I have a twisty puzzle for you. However, this one is in 2D. So this is a planar twisty puzzle, meaning that it doesn't have three-dimensional turns. All of the turns occur along these three circles here. In the past, there have been many puzzles of this type, where it's just three circles, and they have hexagonal centers. However, this particular example is based on the Hex Shaper by Leslie Lay's company, Very Puzzle. The big difference, however, between this and the Hex Shaper is that, well, you can see that all the pieces here form a flat surface. On the Hex Shaper, they're shaped differently, so thus giving you the name Hex Shaper. Now this, I didn't think it would be adequate to call it a Hex Shaper clone, because everything's the same shape, so you can't actually solve it by shape, you can only solve it by color. So that's why I'm calling this the Hex Twister, because, well, you twist it like this. There we go. Anyway, now I'll show you how I got to this point. You need to print 3 of these hexagonal centers, 13 of these triangular corner pieces, 15 of these somewhat rectangular edge pieces, and 1 of each type of frame. Now all of these pieces have both normal files, so if you print the normal file you'd get 1 of these pieces, and also split files which have split in front of their name. And those are essentially just halves of these pieces, meaning that you don't have to use supports when printing it. You could just print this bottom half, and then print this top half, and then glue them together. I printed them as is because I thought the amount of supports to deal with wasn't actually that big, and it wasn't. These pieces turned out just fine. And the designer also included the SolidWorks file if you want to look at how this was designed, or maybe if you want to modify it on your own. So I've assembled the puzzle now. The assembly process is pretty simple. You just put all these various pieces together and then put them into these 2 frames. Now I haven't sanded them at all or anything at this point. Right now I just assembled them to test and see if the puzzle would turn without sanding. But as you can see, even if it's assembled fully, it does not turn. And if it does, it's either very minimal or very difficult to do it. So what I'm going to do is sand these pieces down. I'm not going to sand everything down, but what I do plan to sand down is these flat areas here, as well as these flat areas here, so that I can sticker the puzzle properly. And on these edges, same. On these nubs, I'll sand down these flat areas here. This one here and this one here. And then here for stickering. And then it's a similar story on the center, which is here. But except here, since there are no nubs, I will only sand down these hexagonal faces for stickering purposes. And now these frames, I could not print them in black. I would have if I was able to, but there was just no black available at the time. But I was originally going to spray paint them, but for now I think I'll forgo that. I might spray paint them later and show you what it looks like when everything is black, but in this video the frames will just be made out of this material, which is actually clear filament. If you look on my Instagram, this actually looks just like ivory filament, which is interesting because clear filament is supposed to be clear. But I guess when it's all compacted together and everything, it just becomes this murky white color. So anyway, I'm gonna sand all of these pieces now. Just to quickly show you the difference that sanding makes, I have only sanded this face and this face on this hexagonal center. On this corner piece, I've sanded these flat surfaces right here, and also the places that are going to get stickered, and on this I've sanded nothing. So let's see, this through here moves super smoothly. You can hear it a little bit, but the movement is completely unimpeded. While on this, it's difficult and hard to it's difficult and hard to move, and just overall not a pleasant experience. So sanding these flat areas certainly does make the turning quality much better. So I do think it's worth the effort. So at this point, all of the pieces have been sanded, and I also cleaned them to get all the dust off. I'm now going to assemble the puzzle again, and the way you do this is you put edges into a centerpiece, and then you put a corner in between the two edges. Of course, this is much easier on a flat surface, so I'm not going to be assembling it all up in the air. Let's go. So at this point, I've realized that the puzzle is a lot less stiff than it used to be. So it used to be fine to just assemble it all on a desk and then put it into the frame. But what I think is a smarter idea is to just assemble it within the frame. So I'm going to try and move it to the frame, kind of without messing it up too much. And then I'll assemble the rest of it within the white frame. Here we go. Alright, so all the pieces have been inserted into the frame. They are a little bit jiggly in here, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue. And now we put the bottom of the frame onto it with the screw holes on top. Now let's see if this can turn. Oh yeah, this can turn. So now what I'm going to do is actually find some screws for this. So to assemble the puzzle, you need to get 3 M3 screws. Make sure they're short, and put them into these 3 holes. I'm just going to salvage them from this old super floppy cube. Alright, so I cleaned these screw holes with an X-Acto knife only on this part. Don't scrape anything out of this part. And I then screwed one of these screws in, and you can see that it does indeed hold it in, so it is the correct type of screw. So now I'll put the other 2 in. Alright, this isn't coming apart now. Anyway, now that this is done, I'm going to cut some stickers for it, sticker it up, and then go outside and solve it. So this is it. After this puzzle is stickered, which by the way, I used the very puzzle stickers which Graphalix included a link to in his on his Thingiverse page, and just make sure that the distance between this edge here and this edge here is 46.5 millimeters if you printed the parts as they are. Now, the sanding helped a lot, and here's how I'm gonna prove that to you. You can see that this circle here turns pretty well if you get it aligned. That's one of the main issues with this. It's not that the pieces have friction, it's just that they get misaligned easily. So this circle turns smoothly, but this circle turns a bit less smoothly. And that's because I actually forgot to sand down this purple corner. So basically wherever it goes, it creates friction that makes its circle kind of difficult to turn. So that just shows how much the sanding actually helps. Thankfully, I'm pretty sure this is the only piece that I forgot to sand down. In terms of the back, I did nothing to it. It's just smoothened out, and you can see the 3 screws here. Now, I don't think it would be fair to judge this and scramble it, solve it, without fixing the purple piece. So what I'm going to do is go inside, sand the purple piece down, and then scramble and solve it, and then give you my final thoughts and ratings then. So after the purple piece was sanded down, I reassembled the puzzle, and now it turns much better. I mean, look at this. This is just as smooth as it could be, reasonably. The only real issue is alignment, but it's not too terrible. You can definitely use it normally. So anyway, now I'll scramble the puzzle. Alright, it's scrambled. Now I've solved this a couple times at this point, and each time you have to start out using the same method. So I like to start by putting, for example, all of the blue pieces together, and then the red ones, and then the yellow ones. But depending on what you get at the end, you're going to have to do something different. You're going to have to do one of a few things. And these pieces that are here can be either really easy or really time-consuming to solve. So we'll see how this turns out. But what I'm going to start with is just completing these circles. So right now I'm going to do the blue one. And there we are. All of the blue pieces are next to each other. Now we'll do yellow. And there we go. The yellow pieces are all next to each other. So now the next step is just in general to do the same with the red, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult because there's kind of less free space you can use, since you don't really want to mess up this area or this area. And sometimes you might actually have to do that, but for now I'm just going to try doing what I've done before, which is taking these corners, pairing them to edges, and then pairing the pair to another pair. I know that's a lot of pairs, but let's get to it. So it wasn't as difficult as I expected to do the red pieces. Sometimes you can get a position that makes it hard. But in any case, what we have to solve now is these mixed colors. And that can range from trivial to very difficult. So we already have these. So we already have this purple in between the blue and red. So that's not bad. Let's see what we can do with the green and orange ones. So we have this, which, I mean, it's closer to being solved than it was before. But you can see here that this pair is mismatched. So I believe you can't just solve this by switching these pieces around. I believe you do actually have to mess up one of the circles. And so after a bit of thinking, I was able to get it into a similar position where the orange is right but the purple is wrong. However, in the process of doing that, I did figure out how to put this purple piece here. And it's similar to the normal down up move that you can do, except you have to take into consideration that it only breaks apart the things here and here. So if you move the yellow as such, these will still be intact if you do the down up move. So basically what I'm going to do now is do the down up, and then do some reverse setup moves to put this back into its correct position. So let's see. Down, up. No, down, down. Yeah, I've been saying down, up, down, up. It's actually down, down, up, up. I'm sorry. Okay, so we've done that, and everything seems decent now. What we need to do is put this back here, I think. So how we do that is bring this red here so that we can put the yellow in the red circle, as such. And then we bring it down, bring this over, because that's the correct slot. And here we go. And here we are. So now I believe, wait. So yeah, now I believe we can just put this back here. And even though this looks a little bit messed up, we actually can use the same algorithm to fix it. So let's see. And here we are, and here we have a point where I'm not sure if it's possible to switch these pieces. It might be, it might not be, but this is the second time that I've solved it and come into this position. So I'm thinking maybe I reassembled this puzzle wrong when I was sanding down the purple piece. But I don't know. I'll look into it, but for this solve, I'm just going to leave it in this state. Overall, this is a really nice puzzle. It's definitely much easier than the Hex Shaper, because in the Hex Shaper, this piece is not the same as this piece, which is different from this and this. And these three pieces are different. So that means each piece has one specific place. You have to pair up very specific pairs. And for example, this piece could just belong here. And no, you cannot put it here. You have to put it there. And overall, that would make for a much more difficult solve. I'm definitely going to buy an actual Hex Shaper after I feel like I've gotten comfortable with solving this one, and then I'll take on the challenge. And now I'll give you the ratings. Alright, so to give this puzzle ratings, first one would be ease of printing, and 1 would be very simple, like no problems whatsoever, and 10 is very complicated. You have to use a lot of supports, or split it yourself, or it's just ridiculous. I'm gonna give this puzzle a 1 because it's pretty easy to print. Like, there's really no problems. Graphalix even provided split pieces if you don't want to use a little bit of support material. And you can see how it compares on the scale for the current puzzles. For required post-processing, I'm going to give this a 4.5. Because regardless of how you print it, you're going to need to sand down all of the little edges. And that actually isn't very easy because you have to grip the tiny pieces with your fingers, and after a while your fingers get tired and there's so many pieces. But it's not that bad. It was definitely manageable. So here's how it compares on the scale with the other puzzles I've reviewed. Ease of assembly, I'm going to give this a 1 because it's very easy to assemble. You just put the bottom down, or the top down, and then put all the pieces into it, and then put the top on and put screws in it. I'm not going to dock points because of the whole screw stripping issue, because that's just inevitable. There's nothing the designer could have done about that. And for final turning quality, I'm going to have to give this puzzle a 7, because while it does turn really well if it's properly aligned, like this, if it's not aligned, it does tend to catch, and the catching isn't hard to fix, but it is a little bit annoying when you're trying to make a turn and then it just gets stuck and you have to figure out which piece is causing the lockup. Anyway, those have been the ratings. Thank you very much, Graphalix, for designing this, and thank you for watching. Have a great day.